Picking out a future champion from a batch of prospects can be tough work, but a guy like Michael Morales certainly does look destined for glory. And with a division like welterweight that seems to be going through a big switch up at the top, Morales looks like he could be in a prime position to step into a ranked fight next time and begin sweeping these older veterans aside. At 16-0, he came into the UFC through the Contender Series and managed to take home 4 straight victories over an increasingly good level of competition. His last 2 wins have indeed come by way of decision, but he's a finisher at heart, and he has the type of power that can make him a title threat before too long. Expect him to take on a ranked opponent in his next outing. Flyweight is a division that is always producing high-energy prospects, but when it comes to breaking into the top 10, we'd urge you to keep an eye on Joshua Van. As a finisher at his core, Van is also one of the youngest fighters in the UFC right now at the age of just 22. He came into the sport with a real flourish, and he's already carving out a very well-rounded resume, having scored many finishes by way of knockout and by submission. In fact, he has a sub by way of calf slicer on his record, which is the type of move you would expect from a Charles Oliveira-level guy, not some youth who's barely old enough to buy a beer. Sharabuddin Magomedov, or Shara Bullet, is the latest Dagestan prospect to find his way over to the UFC, and he was already making a name for himself long before he ever touched down in the octagon. The dude only has one eye for starters, which added a layer of notoriety to him, but it was his highlight reel and wild fighting style that really got people excited. This man may be from the land that brought us Khabib Nurmagomedov and Islam Makhachev. He's a striker at his core, taking a totally different route than those 2 UFC icons. And within this middleweight mix, his range, his power, and overall intensity in there are going to make him a fan favorite no matter what happens. Although with that said, we bet on him breaking into the title picture before too long. Remember, if you're enjoying this content, be sure to leave a like and a comment before subscribing to the channel so you don't miss a single upload. Macy Barber's a classic example of why it's important not to rule out a young fighter who encounters setbacks. At first, Barber was the outspoken young talent who claimed that she was going to beat Jon Jones's record as the youngest champion in UFC history. Then she ran into Roxanne Modafferi and the future champ Alexa Grasso on a 2-fight losing skid. But here's the thing, in the time since, she's gone 6-0, beating increasingly good competition to find her way into the top 10 at 125 pounds. And Barber's still only 25 years old, showing constant improvements to her overall game and temperament inside the octagon. She lost her chance at breaking Jones's seemingly indestructible record as a 23-year-old champion, but Barber has more important tasks ahead of her now. Ikram Aliskerov was known to most hardcore fans as the guy who got uppercut KO'd by Khamzat Chimaev earlier in their careers. But this Dagestan powerhouse has proven himself to be a very, very good prospect in his own right. At 15-1, he's worked his way into the UFC, showcased tremendous power in his 2 victories. But while he can shut anyone's lights out with a clean connection, Aliskerov is yet another export from this region who brings a background in combat sambo to the table. And considering how many out-and-out strikers make up the middleweight top 15, Ikram has a route into title contention this year that it will be very interesting to follow. Tatsuro Taira is a very fun addition to the UFC flyweight division, an unbeaten fighter with 5 straight wins in the octagon. And for a 24-year-old, it's not just his tenacity and clear fighting spirit that strikes us, but his technical skill for a man so young is pretty astounding. Taira has already made many fans within the sport's hardcore fan base because of fighting style. He's a threat on the feet, and he has the ability to score subs on the mat. Now ranked within the top 15, it'll be interesting to see how the UFC opt to matchmake him moving forward. Muhammad Mokaev has a tendency to rub a lot of fans the wrong way, both due to his personality and his smothering fighting style. And we'll admit there's definitely a lack of urgency to the way he fights from top position, unless he manages to explode towards a 3rd-round finish, which he had 3 in a row of at one point. But Mokaev is the number 6 ranked flyweight in the world, unbeaten in the UFC, holding a pro record of 12-0 and a dominant amateur record of 23-0, and he's only 23 years old. This man has all the time in the world to work on his striking and his overall work rate in the cage. It's very easy to judge him based on how unexciting his fights can be, but this guy could spend the next 5 years improving and still not be in his prime. That's a scary thought. Sure, after breaking into the top 10, the easy fights are now a thing of the past, but Mokaev is very, very good at what he does, make no mistake. Lightweight has been the Showtime division for the UFC in recent years. One look at the record of Manuel Torres will be enough to tell you that he would make a perfect addition to the division's upper echelons. He's a violence merchant through and through, and in his last 6 fights, no opponent has made it out of the first round, and 5 of those finishes came in the opening half of the 5 minutes. At 29 years old, he's in his prime with some major momentum behind him, and though we will see his stamina and composure tested once he reaches the upper levels, you gotta think that this guy will be in the top 15 before too long. Kyler Phillips has been in the UFC long enough to have experienced a few stumbling blocks on his road to success. But in spite of the 2 narrow decisions he's lost so far in his time in the top flight, Phillips has shown himself to be a workhorse, and on this recent run, at the age of 28, he appears to be putting everything together quite smoothly. His most recent win over Pedro Munoz showcased a fighter who is finally hitting his stride. And with that number 11 beside his name, he's more than ready to take a step into a top 10 and join the other prospects who have successfully made that climb, such as Song Yadong, who Phillips has an earlier win over. In fact, call the UFC matchmakers right away. We'd like to see that rematch. And finally, the final prospect on our list is also the most well-known, the most notorious, and arguably the most promising of them all. Bo Nickal was an era-defining collegiate wrestler who managed to end his college career on a frankly insane unbeaten streak. Upon missing out on the Olympics by a narrow margin, he decided to dedicate himself to pursuing mixed martial arts. So far, the results have been kind of shocking. Not only does his wrestling game seem to translate incredibly well to this next sport, but he's already showcased that his striking is not to be trifled with. It's already clear that he packs an incredibly big punch, thanks to his natural athleticism, and though it's early days, expect to learn more about Nickal as the year progresses.